So now the most important question as we begin here, how many groups in the audience tonight own shares in Amazon or have Amazon trucks delivering to your door? Just raise your hands. Don't be shy. Okay, this is a totally, just absolutely a moment of privilege. We have the Oblates of Mary Immaculate, we have a stockholder resolution in the Amazon proxy, which you should have gotten in the mail in the last few days. I believe it's number 14 because they have 17 resolutions. Just remember, find the one in there that says Oblates and vote yes, okay? And then I don't care what you do with the rest of them. No, seriously. This is a resolution on tax transparency and accountability because Amazon has been avoiding paying taxes in local jurisdictions for years. And they've particularly, for all of you of Irish descent out there, they've taken great privilege and great advantage of what's called the Irish double dip. Corporations are taxed in Ireland at the rate of 12%. It's the lowest of the low in Europe. And so finally, it's going to change this coming year, but the resolution is precisely about that kind of behavior by Amazon and any other of the tech companies that operate. So just remember, when you open your proxy from Amazon and you look for resolution on tax transparency, number 14, it could be 15, but I'll find out, don't worry. Vote yes. And if you can vote twice, do that. So we're going to take a moment to hear from Arturo and Becky. You can read their Becky's the former president of the Texas AFL CIO. Arturo is the former president of the UFW that I mentioned earlier. This is a piece that we wanted to focus particularly on worker rights, which was the bread and butter issue for ICCR in the beginning, because for those of you who follow the ESG moniker on articles, the E was for environment, the S was for social and for human beings, the G for governance. We spent most of our time in the first 25 years on the S side. More recently brought in and blended the E piece, which is the environment, which are the issues that you've already heard plenty about in terms of what Pope Francis says in Laudato Si, but climate change, greenhouse gases, polluting rivers, all of that sort of stuff. So that's the way the piece comes together. Who wants to go first? Becky? Please give Becky a big San Antonio warm welcome. Sure.
So I will get y'all out of here on time, but first I just want to talk about being an activist and what it takes to be an activist. And as I look around this room, we need more activists because a lot of you have gray hair like I do. So the one story that I told not too long ago that I got a bunch of calls about, I became an activist out of necessity. I was kind of crazy at 16. I ran off to Mexico and got married. And the school did not want me to go to school. They did not want to register me in Corpus Christi Independent School District. I had a home ec teacher who came to my house and said, you know what, you can't take this. So she drew me a roadmap. This is what you need to do with the principal, and then you escalate to the school board, and then you get on the agenda and you will be in school. So I had never done anything for myself before, but I say that she made me an activist. A home ec teacher made me an activist. I did exactly what she said. Me and Lupita were on the agenda for a school board meeting, and they called us that day and said, we're taking you off the agenda. And I said, I'm going to the Caller Times then. And the next morning they called me and said, come in and register, and the rest is history. So the reason I bring that up is when you meet young people that need help, help them. But you know what? Give them a roadmap. Don't always just do it for them. Give them a roadmap, because that's how activists are born. And I'm now 73. That was when I was a junior in high school. So I don't know how to retire now. Activists just don't seem to know how to do it. But please reach out because we need more people with the dark hair like this girl I'm looking at right now, and a few less of us gray-headed people to carry forward the important work that SRIC does, that the AFL CIO does, that we in our communities do. We must get more activism. So that's how I became an activism with a home ec teacher. And I still have the one annual that I bought that year, and I look at her picture every year in September and know that I'm in school. I was able to go to school because of a teacher who inspired me to go do something for my own self. So I was asked to talk about worker rights, and you know, there's been lots of fights that we've done. Some of it was with Sister Mika. When I first met her, we were going on a Maquiladora tour across the border. I was one of the dark-haired girls then. And you know what? Every time I come to one of these dinners, I leave inspired. I learn something new. I hear something new. And so that was a wonderful experience with Sister Mika. What I do remember is we weren't really able to talk to many of the workers, but every now and then there'd be one worker who would kind of look at you like, I want to tell you something. I want to talk to you. And this one girl said, is it true that benzene can harm my reproductive rights? Is it true that benzene can cause cancer in my body? You know what she was doing? She was dipping parts that she was manufacturing in benzene, no gloves, no nothing, her bare hands. So I go back home and I look at benzene, and I'll be darned if the golf place in Beaumont isn't still using benzene, and some of those workers did not know how cancer causing it was. So workers' rights are exposed in various ways, not always from a union member who asked about it. Sometimes it's accidental, and we need to be aware of those accidental findings. One of the things that when I was a young woman, we had, I worked for Southwestern Bell, which was owned, as y'all know, by AT&T. And we visited one of the factories down there for AT&T in the Maquiladoras. But we didn't have a pregnancy leave policy. Women were treated much differently than men. When you became pregnant, if the boss found out about it, you had to leave the payroll at 6 months. That means you took an unpaid leave. You didn't get any salary. You had to pick up your health insurance for that period of time that you were off. And you had to do that because you had to maintain it to have the baby and make sure the baby was born healthy. And you lost what we called net credited service towards your pension, towards selection of hours. It was a workers' rights issue. So we worked with other unions and community organizations. And as y'all know, in 1977, pregnancy became a disability thanks to the EEOC, the Department of Labor, a number of unions, a number of community organizations. If the company had a disability policy for a man to go get a hernia operation, he always got paid. Even a vasectomy, he got paid, but we didn't get paid to have a baby. So we finally changed that with the help of some of your groups probably were involved in that. And 1977 then, pregnancy became a disability at corporations like AT&T and GM. Machinist Union, the teachers unions in the Northeast helped us with that. It was a proud day of my life. And the reason I bring this up, about 6 months ago, I went to a funeral, and afterwards we went to eat with the family. And this one young woman said, "So what has CWA done for me lately?" And I said, "Hey, how was that little baby of yours anyway? I know you're just back at work from having a little baby girl. Let me see a picture." So she showed me. And I said, "That's what the union did for you this year. We have managed to hold on to pregnancy as a disability. But you know what? There are people out there that would like to see that changed and like us to go back to the 1970s, the 1940s. And we can't allow that to happen. But that's a workers' rights issue. We should be able to have a family. We should be able to have a job and a family at the same time. And there are detractors out there now who don't want any rights for women, although they still want to take care of the men. The other thing that is a workers' rights issue in my time, and I joined a union in 1967. This is now 2022, so it's a long time. But the jobs with money were for the men, because you know what? The men had to support their families. And I'm not anti-man. You know, I love my brother Arturo.
There's not that many of us here, Becky, so you can,
yeah.
Be all right.
But we could not even apply for those jobs. Here again, it was a nationwide effort within CWA to fight AT&T and the Southwestern Bell affiliate to get us to apply for, be allowed to even test for those jobs. So we won that too. It was in 1973, and we were able to test for those jobs. The poor women who tried to get some of the outside jobs, workers' rights, they would say, oh, you know, if you're going to climb that pole, you better watch your, you know, what's, because if you burn the pole, they called it, you're going to get splinters in your, you know, what's. It was degrading. It was degrading. It was awful. What did you do back then? You didn't file a sexual discrimination charge, because they would laugh at you and fail you for sure on the test. So we also had to fight those kind of issues for our women. And some of the men didn't support us at first, but they do now. You know, we're all okay now. But as y'all remember the 70s, that's the way it was in the 70s. Women had less rights than men had in the workplace, at the hospital, at the grocery store. Women did not have the same human rights and worker rights as some of the male jobs did. I was one of those that filed a grievance to be tested, and I call it my $1 million grievance. I don't know where the $1 million is, because I don't still have it, but over my career since 1973 till I retired, it probably was close to $1 million if you really average it all out. But I was able to take the test, pass the test, and get the job. And only because we banded together with people of like minds. We couldn't have done it by ourselves. I certainly couldn't have done it alone, but because I became an activist when I was a junior in high school, I said, we are going to fight this too, and we did. And so that's why it's important that we remember all this activism. We've got to do it. The other thing that Sister Mika and I worked on together is, you know, some of our union members are kind of rednecks. And the green jobs thing, the climate was really unpopular within the labor unions, really until very recently. And you would talk about it, and then unfortunately, some of our groups that we work with would come and say, we're going to close down that power plant in Comanche. Well, that just got our people all up in arms, because it was their jobs, their members' jobs. I said, we've got to change the message. We need to retool that plant in Comanche. So that was one of the years that I asked Sister Mika, when I was president of the AFL, to come in and speak to our body about the green jobs. And we ended up getting a grant from the United Steelworkers for an intern who now is the state president for the Sierra Club, Dave Cortez. Some of you may know him, but he's a very nice young man, and we're going to meet with Sister Mika because he wants to meet her, because we have so much in common. The Texas AFL CIO now has a climate department. We have 3 employees in it. So my goodness, how things change once an old lady retires, right? But it's a wonderful excursion when I go there and I see what Sister Mika and I started together to try to change people's attitudes on climate. And she was very, very good for that. I could go on for a long, long, long time with history stories. You don't care about history, but all I want to say is I love this organization. I've left with things today that I hadn't thought about before. I have one challenge now, and Sister Mika and I are going to talk about this later, and that is the Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency. I found out yesterday only that the city of Corpus Christi has given property to a company called Bootstrap LLC. Gave it to them. They de-annexed that piece of property from the city of Corpus Christi boundaries. De-annexed it and gave it. It is a power sucker of an industry. There are not really people there. When you talk about data mining, you think, well, who are these miners? Well, it's not. It's computers and they're not even building a facility. They're bringing in shipping crates, and these computers and all the air conditioning that they're required and all the power that they're required will be in shipping containers. I think there's going to be 16 of them full of computers. We got to get our arms around that because it's an environmental issue. And did you see that Fidelity is now allowing cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in the 401ks if the employers will allow it? Well, you know, sometimes we have to protect our members from their own greed, and that is worrisome to me that they could lose an entire pension plan over misinformation and people that really don't care about you. So oh my goodness. Okay, well, Sister Mika's going to train me. She's been training me for a long time, Father. So
all right.
So she'll keep that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's an honor and a pleasure for us to be here. And I do want to recognize my wife that's here with us this evening, Sonia. She is a Metro Cops leader here in the city and has a long history here with that. And my brother Ray and his spouse Carmen that's here joined us tonight from St. Mary's University. We have a lot of things in common with all of you that are here this evening, and we're very much honored to be with you. I'm not going to speak that long because we want to hear some questions from folks, but I do want to share, I think, a couple of important things. One is that I think it's important we just put farm workers in perspective in terms of who they are today. There's been a long history. We've been involved in this for the last 60 years now, full time. Cesar began his work in 1962, along with a lot of other folks, Dolores and Richard and Helen Chavez, his wife, and so many others that were part of that. But today, farm workers are about 2.4 million workers here in the country, and they're primarily immigrants. There are probably 60 to 70% that are without legal status. So that really puts an understanding in terms of why the conditions are the way they are today, because of the fact that they're probably one of the most vulnerable groups of people within our society today as a result of not having the legal status and so forth. In addition to that, throughout history, they have been discriminated against. Racism has been responsible for keeping them from getting the types of legislation and coverages for workers throughout the country. For example, in 1938, when the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed, Becky knows it well, that's what gave workers a lot of protections that farm workers never got. They were excluded because there was a group of powerful members of Congress from the South that could not ever see Black farm workers have the same rights that other people had, that white farm workers had, or white farmers had during that particular period in history. And as a result, it always stayed. It hadn't changed since then. It still exists today. And when the National Labor Relations Act was passed, same thing. Farm workers were excluded. The only group of workers today that does not have the right to collectively bargain. Now, even despite all those things, there's been a lot of victories, and the victories have come, yes, because of the courage of farm workers and their willingness to stand up and their willingness to fight and their willingness to be activists and so forth and do things that nobody ever anticipated. But also it's come because of folks like you. And that's really important for all of us to really understand the impact that you have had because of your investments, because of your activity, because of what you've done. You've spoken out time and time again at shareholder meetings and so forth. So today we have made some progress. And that's, I think, important for all of us to know and understand. And I'm not going to have the time to relate everything, but there's some key ones. One is that, yes, today, farm workers, at least in the state of California, New York, Washington State, and Oregon, now do have the right to collectively bargain. That didn't exist before. Started in 1975 when we got our first legislation passed during that particular time in the state of California. Heat stress, a huge issue for farm workers. You know, when we know how hot it gets here in San Antonio and Texas during the summer seasons and so forth. Well, it's the same thing in California. It's the same thing in Arizona. You go to the South, the same type of conditions exist as well. And farm workers are out there every single day with no shade, not enough drinking water, the rest, the breaks, they don't get them, and so forth, and they're dying of heat out there. And so one particular case has always stuck out in my mind because it was a young immigrant worker, Maria Isabel Vasquez Jimenez, 17 years old, that migrated over here from Oaxaca some time back. And she came as an undocumented worker. Her uncle Doroteo was working in an area called Lodi, California, which is wine grape area, wine grape country. And she needed the job because her mom was back in Oaxaca with the rest of the siblings, single mom and so forth. So she came here wanting to learn how to do farm work. She was working on the job, carrying these 25 to 30 pound lugs of grapes all day long. Your foreman's watching you, so you got to make sure you're constantly working because you get paid piece rate. You get paid for what you harvest. And the foreman and the contractor, they get paid for what everybody harvests. So if you're not working fast, you're out of here. She couldn't afford to lose that job. So as a result, she was running up and down the rows all day long. Finally, by the afternoon, after not taking breaks, not getting enough water, not getting the rest that she needed and the food she needed, collapsed right there in the field. Instead of calling and taking her to get medical attention, they just drug her off to the side and left her there till the end of the day. Put her in a hot van at the end of the day, all the way to the rear, didn't have air conditioning. And en route, when they were going back to their homes, they finally convinced the driver to take her to a clinic. Got there, and her body temperature was 108 degrees. So by the next day, she died. But Maria Isabel she became the spark because of the fact that the day after I spoke to her uncle, Doroteo, and asked him, what do you want to do? He said, well, I don't have legal papers either, but I don't want other farm workers to go through the same thing that Maria Isabel just went through. And so as a result, I'm willing to fight. And so as a result, began a huge campaign. And there was a Republican governor at the time there in California. We ended up winning. We were able to expand the legislation with Governor Jerry Brown. So today, farm workers in that state and several other states have heat protections. And you could just go on and on. A big issue, overtime. Farm workers, again, were excluded from overtime. And we have fought that for years and years and years to be able to bring about that change. And we were never, ever successful until just a few years ago. And finally, it was the women farm workers that were going and visiting state legislators and putting the pressure on them and telling them, hey, this is my day. I wake up at 4:30 in the morning. I get meals ready for the children, wake them up, make sure they're ready to go. And then they're off to school or daycare or whatever by 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm preparing lunch for work, off to work, working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, 60 hours. When I get home, all I have time for is fix dinner, make sure everybody's cleaned up. And I don't have time to spend on homework. I don't have time to go to parent-teacher meetings or any of that thing. So for me to be able to work for an 8-hour day, I'm now going to have time to spend with my family and as a result, be there with them on weekends and so forth. And so consequently, we became successful winning that. And now we have it in 3 other states as well. And so it's slowly going. And somebody has mentioned earlier in one of the commentaries that were there, persistence. That was one of the things that Caesar taught us day in and day out. You just got to stick with it. And he always used to tell us, you never lose the fight unless you stop fighting. And so that was kind of something we all internalized and understood and believed in, that social change and activism and so forth is something that's always going to be ongoing. And it's going to be a continued process, but we'll get victories here and there and be successful. And as a result, be able to celebrate those victories. We congratulate you on what you've done for the last 4 decades. It's been incredible what you've been able to accomplish, and know that because of your endeavors, a lot of other workers have benefited and will continue to benefit from your good work. Thank you very much.
So what great testimony and witness from Arturo and Becky. Any quick questions you want to ask or comments you want to make? Would be welcome. We've got a couple of minutes. You're not usually this shy, I know. It's getting late, but I have a question. What do either of you think of the situation ongoing with unionization at either Amazon or Starbucks?
We have an Amazon facility coming into Corpus Christi. I drove by the building Monday, and it's almost ready to occupy. It's only 100 members, but we already know that we're going to go after those 100. And that should be, I hate to be lazy, but that should be easier than the 3,000 member facilities. And we have volunteers now who are ready to work on it. The day that they announced it was coming, we started getting, and I'm retired, but I got calls at home saying, how can we help with Amazon? So we're ready to work on that, and we'll stay in touch and let you know where we are. The other thing is we're organizing our bus drivers in Corpus Christi. A long time ago, they had union representation. They lost it. I've never figured out what, but a different union is now organizing there. So we hope that that is successful. And I think across Texas, we have a good number of things going, and I intend to continue to organize until I can't organize any longer.
Very good. Arturo.
Yeah, I just think it's incredible. I mean, we were talking about the younger generation coming, and I think we're seeing a resurgence taking place out there with a lot of folks. I mean, one of the beautiful things about the whole situation in New York City with the organizing of Amazon there, it wasn't done by a formal institutionalized labor union. It was done by an individual that had a grievance, had an issue, and was willing to go around and start talking to the rest of his fellow employees there, workers and friends and so forth, got it going, and they beat the behemoth of the industry. So I think it just gives a lot of hope to people that if you are willing to take the risk and willing to go out there and do the work, that you can have success.
You have a question back there, Rhonda? Yeah.
I want to just make a comment about the boycotts, just what you were saying too. I think once upon a time, I heard Cesar Chavez say, somebody asked him, well, how many people have to boycott lettuce or whatever before there's a change? I expected him clearly to say, 70, 80, 90%. He said 2 to 5%. I was shocked, so maybe you could say a little bit about that power, that we have as consumers.
I thought you were going to recommend we put some nails in the road when those blue trucks are coming by, Susan, but...
We did never do that, Father Shepherd.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, no, I mean, boycotts, yeah, Caesar always used to say as well is that the boycotts are different than politics. Politics, you have to wait till there's an election that comes up. Boycott, you can vote every day by just walking in the store, and everybody can boycott you at every age and whatever. So boycotts have a real tremendous power. And the reason 2 to 5% really work is because there's not a big profit margin anyway for a lot of these particular products and retailers, especially retailers. And so truth be told, what happened in 1969 and 70, the boycotts had become so powerful with table grapes and lettuce and the same thing in 1973 that the retailers got fed up. Says, look, we're not going to continue fighting the battle for you growers because you're not willing to do what's right for the workers. And we're losing big money here. When we have people standing in front of our stores and asking them not to shop there or to boycott a particular product, and they end up going to some other store, we can't afford to lose those customers. So it was the retailers that really did put the pressure. So when you go to retailers, then that has an impact. And the boycotts can really be successful with a relatively small percentage of people that participate. So.
Do I dare ask if anybody was involved in boycotting lettuce or grapes in your youth? Oh, look at those hands. All right. How'd it go? Another last comment or question? Come on. Over that way, right there, Anna.
I'd like to ask, I've had a lot of experience working with immigrants, especially the immigrants who are undocumented. Do you have any suggestions on what can we do in order to give them legal passage to become citizens?
What we do? What? I'm sorry.
Give them legal passage to become citizens.
Oh, okay. That was one of my topics, but I didn't really speak to it. But immigration reform, look, we've been involved in this for the last 22 years. I personally have been involved in it, going to Washington, D.C. and spending time with all the legislators and so forth. I want to say we're cautiously kind of optimistic that something may happen this year. The last time that we had immigration reform, as you know, is 1986. And I'll speak specifically about farm workers. We in the House this year, earlier this year, for the first time ever passed farm worker legislation for immigration reform. It's called the Farm Workforce Modernization Act. It was bipartisan. We got 34 Republicans in this Congress to vote and support that legislation. And the growers and the employers in the industry are hurting big time for having access to workers because of the increased enforcement and so forth at the borders. And so as a result, they're putting a lot of pressure on members of Congress to take some action and so forth. And then, of course, there's the DREAM Act. And Senator Durbin has been doing a lot in regards to trying to move that. He has some bipartisan support for that as well. And there's discussions. What we won't get for sure, and unfortunately, I would say that probably comprehensive immigration reform isn't coming for a long time. But there are possibilities of getting chunks of this done. And I would say that, continue to talk to and put the pressure on the legislators here within the state, members of Congress, as well as within our two illustrious senators, to put the pressure on them to go out and do this because it needs to be done. For ag workers, we're not going to have an ag industry, folks, if we don't get immigration reform here soon. There's just not enough people to go out there and harvest the crops, fruits and vegetables. And we do not want to be put in a situation any more than we already are of importing our agricultural products from other countries. We're at about 50-50 right now. And the longer we wait to resolve this situation, the more farms that go out of business because they don't have access to labor.
Becky, you get the last word.
My hands full of stuff. Well, first, I want to say thanks for inviting me. Thanks for letting me see y'all again. It's good to see many faces that I've seen over the years, and I don't know why I don't know why I've been a bad girl and not being a member recently. I guess when I retired, I lost my mind. However, I do think that Arturo is right on the immigration. We've just got to. We can't sit idly by. We can't act like it's not important to us. We have to call our city council people. We have to call our county commissioners as well, because they're the ones that are implementing the SB4 that the legislature passed a couple of years ago. We got resolutions passed in the city of Robstown against it. We tried in the county of Nueces, which is Corpus Christi, against it, and we lost that one. They loved it. We now have a new county judge, and things are a little bit different, but we must start at a low level to the high level, as Arturo mentioned. Our United States senators, shame on the one who is a Hispanic for being so anti-Hispanic. I don't get it, but we cannot give up. We must continue to talk to employers about the right hiring practices. We can't let another shutdown at the border let $4 million worth of, or $1 billion worth of produce go to waste that just happened with the political stunt. So we cannot be silent. I think part of the problem is we don't have newspapers anymore that we can write letters to the editor, but we need to figure out how to find our voice and express our voice. Go to city council meetings if you can get off and go to your county commissioner meetings, and haunt the Capitol in the state of Texas. Because when you have one guy who can make everyone boycott books, a crazy state rep from North Texas, things are backwards. Things are backwards. And some of those books, it's because Cesar Chavez's name is in them. Dr. Hector Garcia's name is in them. Thurgood Marshall's name is in them. So we must find our voice, because some of us have lost it. We've got to find our voice and advocate and be active. Thank you very much for having me too.
Amen.